All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're mapping out the fascinating evolution of the Egyptian military and how it quietly became the last formidable conventional army in the region. Look, if you really want to understand the modern Middle East, you have to look closely at the hardware, the history, and the sheer mechanical ingenuity sitting in Egyptian motor pools right now. Here's a quick roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll cover recent border drills, the legacy of 1973, their hybrid arsenal, domestic production, air defense in the Sinai, and wrap up with the regional pressure game. To set the stage for why all of this matters right now, take a look at this high-stakes warning from early 2026. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu really highlighted just how closely Egypt's military buildup is being watched by its neighbors. With surrounding nations facing some pretty severe military degradation lately, Egypt stands out as a highly capable, fully intact conventional force. And honestly, that completely changes the calculus for everyone. Okay, Section 1, Border Drills and Tensions, specifically focusing on the Badr 2026 maneuvers. So let's start right at the fence line. During the Badr 2026 live-fire maneuvers, Egyptian special forces were placed literally 100 meters from the Israeli border. You can see the stark contrast in reactions here. Israeli media was seriously on edge, particularly about Egypt deploying communication jamming tech that close to the fence. It drew some incredibly uncomfortable parallels to the tactical blindsides of October 2023. But for the Egyptian military, just routine sovereignty. To them, these were fully coordinated drills meant to secure their borders against insurgents, utilizing established bilateral channels. Moving on to Section 2, the legacy of 1973 as a major catalyst for modernization. To understand what Egypt drives and flies today, we have to look back at the crucibles of the 20th century. You simply cannot grasp modern Egyptian military doctrine without understanding the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Think about this. Egyptian engineers brilliantly used high-pressure water hoses to just blast through massive sand barriers. But the real game-changer was the tech. Infantry units used briefcase-sized Sagar missiles to absolutely decimate enemy armor. It literally sparked global fears that the era of the tank was over forever. Even more wild, they set up a dense Soviet missile wall that broke the Israeli Air Force with a loss rate so severe it actually forced the U.S. Pentagon back to the drawing board to invent modern stealth technology like the F-117. And then, the 1979 Camp David Accords flipped Egypt's arms pipeline overnight, switching their main supplier from Moscow to Washington. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the hybrid Frankenstein-style arsenal. After that 1979 treaty, American equipment like M60 tanks and F-16s absolutely flooded in. But here's the kicker. Egypt never threw out their old Soviet gear. They kept it running through cannibalized parts and sheer mechanical stubbornness. What they ended up creating is a masterful blend, a wildly unique inventory where the Cold War never really ended, it just kind of merged together. Seriously, just look at their motor pools and hangars. You will find top-tier American M1A1 Abrams tanks parked right alongside modernized Soviet T-62s and T-55s. Look up and you've got US F-16s and French Rafales sharing the exact same airspace with Russian MiG-29Ms. They meticulously balance this mix to ensure they are never, ever entirely dependent on a single geopolitical bloc. Now, you might be wondering, how do you bypass global export restrictions from rival superpowers? Well, when Washington repeatedly refused to sell long-range AMRAAM missiles for Egypt's F-16s, Cairo didn't just shrug and accept a tactical disadvantage. No. They simply turned around and bought Russian MiG-29Ms for one specific reason. Russia would happily sell them the R-77 long-range air-to-air missiles they needed. They intentionally buy from rivals to plug any capability gaps left by export restrictions. This approach leads to some downright incredible mechanical ingenuity. Take the October-class missile boat. It's a Soviet hull shipped to England, fitted with Italian engines, British electronics, and French missiles. It's essentially the Frankenstein's monster of naval warfare, but it works brilliantly. Or look at the SP-122, where they took an American Paladin chassis and literally just bolted surplus Soviet guns onto it so they could burn through huge warehouses of old ammunition. Let's shift gears to Section 4, domestic weapons production. Because relying on foreign powers always comes with massive strings attached, Egypt has made a huge strategic push to build it themselves. Through state-owned enterprises and aggressive technology transfers, they are rapidly transitioning from being a mega buyer of imported arms to a self-sustaining producer. The scale of this is absolutely staggering. Take Factory 200, for example. It is the absolute only facility outside the United States that has ever produced the M1A1 Abrams tank. And now, they're using that same factory to build the advanced South Korean K-9 Thunder howitzers and K-11 fire direction vehicles locally. At the Alexandria shipyard, they are building highly complex German Miko frigates and French corvettes. For the grueling counterinsurgency efforts in the Sinai, they locally produce the Vihold Temsa MRAP to survive explosive devices. Oh, and they build the Soccer 105, a shoulder-mounted thermobaric rocket specifically designed for tunnel warfare that sends a massive pressure wave underground. Their push into unmanned aerial vehicles is where things get truly deceptive. The indigenous Hamza 3 kamikaze drone uses AI for target recognition, sure, but its most brilliant feature is the integration of Lüneburg lenses. These are modular, radar-amplifying attachments. Basically, they bounce signals back to trick enemy air defense radars into thinking this tiny, cheap drone is actually a full-sized fighter jet. It is a brilliant decoy tactic. All right, Section 5, Air Defense and the Sinai Peninsula. We really have to unpack their incredibly complex, multi-layered air defense network. It's essentially a modern, technologically hybridized echo of that famous 1973 missile wall. They've built an impenetrable shield by using Chinese and Russian long-range systems like the HQ-9B and S-300 to push enemy command jets way back. Beneath that layer, American NASAMS and German IRIS-T systems handle fast jets and cruise missiles. And right at the bottom, point defense systems protect the larger missile batteries themselves. By systematically closing every single altitude and range gap, they've purchased the absolute best specific tools from across the globe. They are actively integrating Western and Eastern tracking radars into a single, cohesive, and incredibly lethal net. And speaking of the best tools, look at how they defend against modern drone swarms. The Skywolf Guardian is a German directed energy weapon that uses high-power electromagnetic pulses. The economic genius here is mind-blowing. They use these invisible pulses to instantly fry the electronic circuits of a $20,000 kamikaze drone so they don't have to waste $1 million interceptor missile shooting it down. And this brings us right back to the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt has deployed Chinese HQ-9B long-range air defense batteries into the region. Now, these have a 300-kilometer range. By positioning them in the northern Sinai, their engagement envelope extends directly over southern Israeli airspace. This fundamentally challenges the demilitarized spirit originally established by the Camp David Accords, and is really the root of the regional anxiety we discussed earlier. Finally, Section 6, the regional pressure game. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture. How does all this hardware translate into geopolitical influence? It's the ultimate paradox. How does a nation struggling with crippling external debt, inflation, and massive disruptions to Suez Canal revenues exert so much regional power? Because they aren't acting like a nation in economic distress, they're acting like a heavyweight dictating the rules. They're playing a heavy-handed, highly effective game. They've enacted the Mashafat al-Sikka, or distance of the road doctrine, assuring Gulf nations that Egyptian military support is just down the road. Their intelligence apparatus opened a secret back channel with Iran's Revolutionary Guard to ensure Egyptian gas fields remain totally untouched. They are actively stepping in to mediate Lebanese-Israeli diplomacy, and they're even projecting a military presence into Somalia to strategically counter and isolate Ethiopia. As we've seen throughout this explainer, Egypt has quietly but very aggressively built an incredibly capable, domestically reinforced war machine. By mastering the integration of rival superpower tech and reviving the hard-learned lessons of 1973, they really do stand alone in their conventional readiness. Which leaves us with one provocative question. As the balance of power continues to fracture around them, how will this immense, hybridized military might reshape the entire future of the region? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this helped map out the true scale of the Shield of the Nile,